You are now listening to the Minority Trailblazer Podcast. Let the story begin.
One time for the lovers, two times for the ladies, three times for the brothers, four times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 One time for the lovers, two times for the ladies, three times for the brothers, four times for the babies. Do you love her? 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 Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. Brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin, love her brown. She my brown skin, love her brown skin. Hold me down.
Welcome to the Minority Trailblazer Podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Eel, the culture change agent. You already know on this show we interview young, successful minorities in a variety of fields to educate, empower, and inspire our current and future generation of leaders. And as always, I got a show for y'all today. I'm pumped up. I'm really excited, legitimately excited, because we're bringing somebody on the show that's been here before. She dropped a classic episode. I'm not just saying that for my health, a classic episode before. And now she coming back to double dip and give and add value. I mean, she emailed me just to say, yo, I'm working on something that's big and I want to share. And I listened, I was like, yo, that's huge. And I know everybody, I mean, I get contacts all the time. People, hey, I want to get bigger contracts. I want to work with these brands. I want to do this. I want to do that. So it's crazy how the synergy kind of lied. And when we talk, that's a project she's directly working on right now. Matter of fact, she just jumped off the ship over the last couple of days working with Nike on a major project that hopefully she can kind of share tease us a little about. So I'm going to read her intro again. And if you heard this episode before, if you heard about it before, I'm going to get in the show notes, the episode that we went in deep into her story. We're just going to go high level into her story and then jump right into actionable things that you can do if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a relationship builder, but specifically for my small business owners and entrepreneurs, how you can align yourself and work with bigger brands and corporations without having to have a huge following, a huge catalog of work. All right. So she's an entrepreneur, writer, philanthropist, and unshakable optimist dedicated to helping you make things happen. She is motivating to pushing boundaries, and her career has been defined by never taking no for an answer, always moving forward, no matter how small the steps, and taking a fresh approach to business management. By taking a hands-on, innovative, and modular approach to management and development, she has rapidly grown her visual communications business to a team of 10 across 2 international offices, and now she has a formula of success she can share to you, not only about building your creative teams, not only about building your relationships, not only about being a positive, good-hearted, and light individual, but also, too, how to be a trailblazer in your own regard, man. So without further ado, I would like to introduce again Kymberlee Jay to the Minority Trailblazer Podcast. Welcome to the show.
Yay! I can't believe you've had me back.
Yeah, man. Hey, I got to give myself a round of applause. That was the smoothest intro I've done in like 20 episodes. So I got to big up myself.
I had a lot of words. There's a lot of words in my intro as well. I might need to rewrite that so it's a little bit smoother.
That was smooth. You know, man, I had people send me 2-page bios. I'm like, bro, you just started your career. How you going to send me a 2-page bio, bro? It's crazy. But yeah, like I said, man, I am legitimately excited to have you on the show. So for the people that haven't, and we just going to jump right in, right? So for the people, and like I said, the show is going to be a tad different today. So my normal listeners, the quotes of the day and all that stuff, we kind of ear it on the side, jump right in. If you want to hear that, I'll shoot the episode. I'll play the episode where the full podcast is. But Miss J, for the audience that did not get a chance to listen to your first episode in this podcast, that are new to you, can you just give us, and now it's time for you to step in your soapbox before we jump into what you really want to talk about. Can you just give us a high-level overview of your story, who you are, and what you do?
Okay, so as you'll know from the previous podcast, my story is a bit of a strange one. But essentially, I started out as a professional dancer and choreographer. I moved into running my own animation business. from my learnings of being a dancer and choreographer and running an animation company, I started to do some business coaching. And now my focus is on business coaching with a little sort of sidestep into the dance stuff every so often, because of course that's what keeps you young and that's what keeps you fun.
So I got it. Episode 91. For those that have not listened to her story in full effect, like it's, when I tell you, cliffhangers all around. Matter of fact, after you listen to this show, go listen to episode 91. Find the solution. All right. The journey from Nike signed dancer to animation company CEO. That was like that was many, many moons ago.
Yeah.
On episode 91. Go check that out. So, Miss J, right now, there's a big project you're working on that you're excited to come and share. And I want you to talk a little bit about the project, and then we're going to break down a couple ways that small business owners or aspiring small business owners, when they start out, can sign and land contracts with bigger companies and play big.
Absolutely. Oh man, I'm so excited for this. So when I was dancing professionally, and we're talking sort of 15 years ago now, I signed to Nike as an athlete, and it was an incredible time in my life. And I learned so much from just being involved with that brand, not only from an athlete perspective or from a creative or performance perspective, but from a business perspective as well. I got to see the inner workings of their company, and not many people get to do that. So I attended things like their sales conferences and their brand meetings and their marketing and communication sessions. So I really got to understand how this brand was put together and essentially what made them tick. One of the things that allowed me to do was continue my contract with them, because I could see how I could add value to them as a big brand. So whereas my initial contract was for, a year, I actually ended up staying signed to them for 8 years. So it was,
wow.
Yeah. And even in that time, funnily enough, I started out with them signed as a dancer, but my sport changed. So I actually went on to run as well. I used to do long distance running. So for a little while, they also involved me in their running campaign and then their fitness campaign. So I managed to bounce around a bit, but I stayed connected with the brand and I stayed contracted to the brand. So now, when I first signed to them, that was sort of like back 2005. Now here we are now, 2019. I'm still working with the brand. I'm no longer signed as an athlete, but I work with them on a contractual basis as a consultant for lots of different things that they do, across all sorts of categories and all different sports. I absolutely adore working with them. So moving into creating my own business and then becoming a business coach, a lot of people would ask me, before we even got to, hey, how do you start a business? What do you need to, to be a startup? How do I find funding? What is this? What's the mission statement? What's the vision? The first question I always got was, how did you sign to Nike? Like, how does that happen? So I tell them my story, and I realized that within my story, and all of the things that I'd learned, I'd applied, a lot of my learnings to my animation company, because within the animation company, I managed to land quite a few big brands working there too with them. I keep doing that in past tense, but my animation company actually still does exist. It is actually still running. It's still there. For all my clients out there who think I've dropped off the face of the earth, I haven't. We're still running. We're still fully, full speed ahead. But like I said, I'm really excited about this project. Anyway, I realized that there was, in answering people and telling them about how I got in with Nike and stayed with Nike, and then how I used, similar strategies to get in with other big companies for my animation company and stay with them as well as recurring clients. I realized that there's a system to it. It's like a process. And it wasn't because I was anyone special or I had anything or did anything that was, out of this world. It's because I followed a very simple process. And off of the back of that, I realized, hang on a minute, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Absolutely anyone can do it. And there are so many, small businesses and entrepreneurs and freelancers who I know want to create those links, want to create those relationships with big brands, but they're not doing it. And a lot of the reasons that have come to light, it's been about, firstly, it's fear. You see yourself as such a small entity against that giant corporate machine. And you sort of assume that they wouldn't want to hear from you. They wouldn't want to work with you. When in actual fact, those giant corporate machines exist and do so well because of the small businesses, the freelancers and the entrepreneurs that are working on the inside to support them. So it's so important that if, small businesses want to get involved and want to get connected with big brands, that they do so. And so I created this program called Land the Brand to help small businesses, entrepreneurs and freelancers do just that, to help them to build those relationships with big brands so that they could approach them for partnerships, for sponsorships, and for sales opportunities. Because there's this huge gap where, the big brands don't know how to find these smaller organizations, a reputable, smaller sort of organization. And the smaller organizations and the smaller businesses just don't want to step into the limelight and say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready, let's go. So the aim of Land the Brand is to make these small businesses much more confident, make these entrepreneurs and freelancers, much more forward thinking in the sense that they can step to these big brands and they can land them. They can create, agreements, contracts, they can partnerships, and this is across the board. So it doesn't matter what your business does. It doesn't matter, what field you're in, where your expertise lies. There's a brand for you out there that you could connect with. And of course, by connecting with a large brand, you then have the opportunity to generate revenue, and in such a way that often it's recurring and often it's like my client base for the animation company, they're repeat clients. 65% of my revenue comes from repeat business. So it's important because it fuels that business. It keeps it running. It makes sure that, you've always got something coming in every month. So I think it's important for small businesses and entrepreneurs to get together with larger companies who have those budgets to be able to fund and fuel your business. And of course, you have that specialist expertise that they can't access and they can't tap into anywhere else. It's a partnership made in heaven. So now my job is to help with the matchmaking. So I'm going to start putting these small brands with these large brands and making sure that they understand the process with which to do that. There it is in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I'm excited to kind of jump right in. And for my listeners out there, specifically ones that are even not entrepreneurs, stay with us because the concepts and a couple of things we're going to talk about in a high level can help you in any aspect of your life as far as, because every one of us has fear of things that we would like to do, but due to lack of confidence, due to lack of resources, due to a lack of a lot of different things, we stay on the sidelines. So the couple of things we're going to talk about, don't just think of them from a practical perspective, but thinking of them from a perspective of where you're at right now, right? Also, too, I want to say, to jump right in, there's a couple of things that stood out from the intro, and I want to, like I said, don't give us all the beans. Don't spill all the beans on Land the Brand, but kind of just from a high level. And there's 5 things that I want to kind of have the auspice of this podcast cover. And feel free though. I have these 5 things, but you're the expert at this. So if it's like one thing, do you want to add one thing? We'll work what you got. Awesome. So the 5 things I wanted to talk about first, would be fear. So I want to kind of discuss just, and the way I want to layer it is one, I want to take you through I want to take for your head first through when you were actually when you first feared like that contract with Nike and other things. So I want them to take him inside your mind, and then now fast forward to what you know now, how you would attack things. Like I said, on a high level. Then I want to talk about introductions. So what does that look like as far as introductions with these kind of corporations? Because a lot of people say, okay, I don't fear, but I don't know how to get into it. Should I cold call? Should I do this? So maybe just some thought process to go behind that. Then talk about a little bit about pricing. I know it's very situational, but more so, just that, and that kind of goes along with fear, but that pricing bit, we're just going to touch a little bit on that. And then the last 2, delivering, because at the end of the day, once you sign the contract, you got to deliver. And what are some key things that you learn on how to like frame expectations, etc., so that you don't overpromise, because a lot of times, and I can speak for myself, you work with a bigger company and they maybe give you more money than you ever had. your emphasis is to say, okay, I can do all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, you can't deliver on it. And then the last thing I want to talk about, which I've seen, as you said with your quote, 65% of your business is returning clients, is retention. What are the main focuses on how to retain? Because, there's a lot of misnomer out there that put out these ads, get new business, new clients. But actually, I read your book, how to go swimming with sharks and not get eaten. I think you recommended, I think I found that book off a recommendation about, your sales book about riding a bike. And then that led me to that book. So I learned some stuff on that, man. But let's first talk about on the high level fear. So let's take us inside your brain and then know what you know now, how to attack it for our small business owners. And like I said, this is just a snippet of what you can expect from the Land the Brand course.
Okay. So fear, right. So this is huge. This is such a big issue, and it stops us from doing so much. It stops us from just achieving potential left, right, and center. And I'm not going to lie, I still feel fear. Of course I still feel fear. I am human. It is, it's a natural state of mind. It comes from, thousands and thousands of years of just, evolution and the way we are built. We are built to fear what we do not know and we do not understand. So when I first signed to Nike, yes, I was terrified because I didn't know them and I had no idea what to expect from such a big organization. Now you have to remember, I came from a dance background, a very creative dance background too. So I was literally a street and hip hop dancer. I would dance on street corners. I would, we'd use things like bus shelters and window glasses glass in the window panes of shops and stores to rehearse in because we didn't have access to mirrored space, all that kind of stuff. Small community grassroots. And then all of a sudden I'm thrown into this gigantic corporation. So my head was spinning, absolutely spinning. And I realized that at the time, all I could do was take it one step at a time. And another thing at that time that was quite interesting was I had no idea, or I couldn't see any longevity in my connection with Nike. Like in the beginning, I didn't really understand why they signed me, if I'm honest. In the beginning, it was like, well, I got really lucky here, I think. So I am just going to roll with it and see what happens. So as, time progresses and you start to get to know the business and you start to get to know people and you start to get to know the operations, of course, the fear reduces. But no matter what, initially you're going to feel that fear because you don't quite know what, that business and that organization is about yet. Nowadays, what I do to be able to overcome that fear is to learn as much as I can about that business or organization before I even connect with them. I do my homework as much as I possibly can, as much research as I possibly can. And the cool thing about, big businesses is, and within the Land the Brand course, I've done a section on this and it's called Insider Information. They give you that information that you need, the knowledge that you need. It's available for you 24/7. It's online and it's free. You just have to know where to look for it. So if you can understand who they are and why they do what they do, you've already won half the battle. So it's important not to only just get, the products that they make or, the brand that you can see immediately. It's about understanding their brand architecture. So knowing, yes, this is the brand. Is this a master brand or are there sub brands? And so understanding if those sub brands, then how they're connected, because of course you can go to a brand like Virgin and you recognize Virgin immediately because Virgin stamped their name on everything that they do. So we call that a master brand. So we know that Virgin is Virgin. So you know that when you're approaching a company like Virgin, you can look up, something in, let's say, Virgin Airlines, and know that generally their branding, their purpose, their reasons, their whys, they all kind of filter through. So then when you shift across to Virgin Galactic or any of their other ventures, everything feels contained. Everything feels consistent. And then it's about whether or not, if you're understanding, if there are what we call hybrid brands. So hybrid brands, actually, before I even get to hybrid brands, let's talk about a house of brands, because a house of brands is cool. So if you think about Procter & Gamble, a lot of people have no idea who that company are. But immediately you will know their house of brands. You will know Tide. You will know Bounce. You will know CoverGirl. You will know Pampers. You will know Pantene. These are all brands within Procter & Gamble. So if you approach Tide because you like to work with that particular brand, it's great to know actually the rest of the brand family, because again, this gives you insider knowledge that can boost your confidence, because you can talk confidently about their brand architecture. And then, as I just mentioned, this idea of hybrid brands, this is like a cross between having a master brand, so a clear brand throughout, and then having a house of brands where the brands aren't necessarily recognizable or related to one another. So a hybrid brand, a great example of this would be the Walt Disney Company. Because they have things that are, they have brands that are specifically linked to Walt Disney, but then they also have Marvel. They also own ESPN. They also have, Pixar. We know that these are connected with Disney somewhere, but it doesn't immediately strike you as a Disney company. So it's about knowing just the things like this means that when you step through those big glass doors into that big brand's headquarters, into their office, just having that idea can alleviate fear tremendously, because you can start to feel more comfortable because you understand who they are. You understand what they do. You understand why they do it. And you understand how you fit into that picture. Once you have that behind you, it is so much easier to create that connection, to have that alignment. And then you'll find that actually the fear is just significantly reduced. Again, I'm not saying you're going to walk in there fearless. That's not going to happen, but it's about taking control. And the more that you can control, the less fear you're going to have.
Yeah. And you said everything. I don't want to add anything. The only thing I want to say is a question. So now, how long is your research process now to say if you were looking for a collaboration or sponsorship with a company or et cetera? Do you outsource that to someone? Like now you have a system where you outsource that and you don't really touch that, or now it may take just a couple hours, and you don't speak to what you do, because it seems like once you get the system, there's a couple key things you go to, a couple key things that you need to know just as an intro point. But how long to say if you had a call, or if you wanted to, say you're a creative company and you wanted to outsource something to Adidas, because Adidas has put a lot of money into creatives, et cetera, and you wanted to go to that. And Adidas might not be the best thing because you already work with Nike, but just say another company, right? How long does the process take for you? Because I just want to ask that question.
The process is a long one. It's not something that you do overnight. And actually, you have to potentially find your own sweet spot in terms of cutoff point, the point where you stop learning about them and you start taking action and you start approaching them and you start creating those connections. Because technically you could learn about these companies for years. There is so much about them that you could boost your knowledge forever. We don't want to do that. We need to take action. We need to approach them. But when we do approach them, we need as much of that knowledge as we possibly can. So there are a number of categories that I'll research beforehand. So of course I'll try and understand their brand. I'll try and understand their story. I'll understand the people that work there and the people that run the organization, the C-level executives. Sometimes a little bit into their history as well, how long they've been there and why they're there and where they came from. I'll also start looking at their communications from a press perspective, and also a social media perspective as well. So, what are they talking about right now, what's important to that business, because if it's important to them, the odds are they've put out a press release because they want to be able to tell the world. So I'll look up press releases for them. And then social media, again, a great tool for looking at what the business is doing, because even though it's consumer facing, it's less about the operations and much more about the consumer. It'll give you a really good idea of what's important to them now, where they've come from, and potentially where they're going in the future as well. So that process, it can take a little while just to get all that information together, pull it together. And again, with that information, figure out where you sit within that. Because it's all good having this knowledge and all this information and knowing everything about this organization. But actually, if your product, your service, your offering, your program, whatever it is that you're approaching them with, or you're trying to talk to them about, doesn't sit well within what it is that they're trying to do, within their purpose, well, the match isn't going to happen. You know, so it doesn't matter how much you know about them. If what you do doesn't align with them, then it's no good. You can sit in a meeting and, you know, that it won't go anywhere. So you've got to make sure that actually they are the right brand for you to work with. Because one of the things I get quite a bit, or I've had quite a bit, is people saying, hey, I want to work with Apple. I want to work with Nike. I want to work with all these brands. You know, of course you do, because they're popular, because they make cool things. But ultimately, do they fit with what it is that you do? You know, do the two of you actually have any alignment whatsoever? Because if you don't, they're the wrong brand for you. And just to be working with them just to try and be cool, just to have that kind of association for the sake of trying to, you know, score points, that's a complete dead end. It doesn't work that way. It never works that way. It's completely inauthentic, and it just, you know, it will fall apart before it even begins. So it's pointless. It's pointless trying, to be honest. You've got to find the brand, and you've got to be talking to the brands that really connect with what it is that you do and why you do it.
So basically, as we move forward, learning with the purpose. So not just learning for the sake of learning, but learning going in exactly mirrored what my company offer, what we can offer, specifically towards how can we add value to do what they're doing, not just to say, okay, they do this. No, it's not a partnership where they helping you out. No, they don't need you for that. Like, no, they're not. No, it's how you specifically, you see weaknesses, you see gaps, and you go. But the biggest thing, and we're not going to talk about this right now, but that's probably companies that you probably see a lot of times is, it's hard to learn the gaps when you don't know specifically the value or what your company does. Cause just cause you dance doesn't mean that you should go for that. It's like, maybe you, like, can you speak in that real briefly? Cause you may have seen come into this where, like, there is a match somewhat, but they're not really clear on what the person that's trying to get the sponsorship, the partnership, etc. They're not really clear on what type of business that they're in. Have you seen that before a lot?
Oh, yeah, a number of times. Even, you know, that comes up even with businesses who are trying to find their markets, who are trying to talk to their customers and their consumers. If they don't know what they do, they have no idea about how to talk to their customers. And I see this a lot in businesses that aren't doing so well. And if I talk to them and I say to them, you know, tell me about you, tell me about your business. What do you do? You know, who is it for? A lot of the time it's a really rambly sequence of not very much. And I think to myself, if you're not clear about what it is that you do and why, then you're not going to attract the people that need what it is that you do. So you've got to be super sharp, super clear, super focused about what it is that you do. And that's exactly the same for when you're approaching brands. Brands are exceptionally busy places, busy people, busy places, and they don't have time to think beyond what their job description is much of the time. So when you're asking them to be creative, if you step forward and you say, hey, I have this business and it kind of does this, but we could do that. And of course I've got this and maybe, and I used to do this as well. You're asking them to come up with a solution. You're asking them to think about, hey, how might we fit you in here? What is it that you, all right, no, they haven't got time for that. They can't do it and they won't do it either. They'll just point blank ignore you. You need to go in razor sharp like a bullet and say very specifically, I know that your brand does this for this reason, for this audience, and we do this, and this is how we complement what you do. That's it. You have to be so clear, so concise, because the moment you go in there with this plethora of services and things you could do and things you're good at. And you're telling them about, the trophies you won at football when you were a kid. It's like none of this matters. What matters right now is what do you do and how does that help us? That's all I need to hear from you. Yeah. So if you can't answer that question, it's possible that you're not ready yet to be approaching those big brands. You've got to do some groundwork on your own business just to make sure you're very, very clear about what it is that you can offer.
Love that. So I think you talked on it a little bit specifically. You were getting there. So let's talk about introductions. And I know there's a variety. We don't have the time and the bandwidth to talk about the variety of introductions that you have. But if you could just kind of from a high level, and I know I've been saying that, audience, for people to be clocking how many times I say a certain word, I'm gonna say it again from a high level introduction. I mean, what's the foundational aspects of introduction into a company?
So to make an introduction, to get an introduction into a company, you've got to be specific about what you do so you know who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. So it's not about generically sort of saying, hey, I'm to whom it may concern, or dear sir or madam. It's not that. It is, let's find the person that directs the department for what it is that we're concerned with so we can approach them. And that's a big part of being able to create those introductions. You have to get to know who works there. And again, a lot of people say, well, how are you going to do that? If you don't, if you're not in there, how on earth would you find out their names? Google is an incredible thing. If you know what you're searching for, you can find just about anything. Between Google and LinkedIn, you can usually find the name of the person that you need to approach. Mm-hmm. And once you have that name, your goal is to get into a meeting space with them, to get them face to face. Now, that is an exceptionally difficult thing to do. But in order to be able to communicate what it is that you have powerfully, it's best done when you're in the same room as that person. The next best thing is over the telephone. So if you can get them on the telephone, then you may be able to, again, engage them and let them know what it is so that you can book in a meeting and be able to get to them. And then third on that list, of course, is email. Now, email's a difficult thing because email's very, very easy to just brush away and ignore. So ideally, you don't want to email. You want to be able to get straight into direct contact with that person. But again, that person is busy, so it's not always going to be possible. So once you have a name, you need a contact number. You need an email address. If you can't find that directly online or via the website, then you can call up the company switchboard and you can ask them, I'm looking, please put me through to such and such, Dave Smith or whatever. They will either put you through or they won't. If they do put you through, then be ready to have that conversation to move it on to the next level and be very, very clear about what it is that you are going to say. Because again, at that point, rambling away isn't going to help you. Your goal at that point, the moment you get them on the phone, is to get them into a meeting. So all you do is just give them the information that they need and intrigue them enough to get them into a meeting. If the gatekeeper, so the person on the switchboard or the receptionist, won't necessarily put you through, sometimes they'll give you an email address. Sometimes they'll question you themselves. They'll say, what is this about? Why are you calling? At that point, it's really important that you don't give away everything that you're doing to the gatekeeper, because actually they don't have any power. They don't have the ability to make any decisions in terms of whether or not you can work with that brand. All of that information needs to go to the decision maker, but you do need to get past the gatekeeper. And in order to do that, it's about putting together a very, very simple, piece that just says, look, we supply this, and I'm hoping to have this conversation with Dave Smith about being able to do that for your business. Can you put me through, please? Now, this is a process. This isn't something that happens immediately. You may find yourself having to call a number of times. You may find yourself, having to just keep, continually trying. And you're going to end up doing things like leaving voice messages and all that sort of stuff, which is perfectly fine, because in order to be able to connect with people at such a high level, you need to keep tapping away. It's not a one-time thing. If you end up in just an email, and that's, as far as you've got so far in terms of the path to contact, it's really, really important that that email is really short and concise. And that it's ideally sent from your business domain. So not from a Gmail address, not from an AOL, not from a Hotmail. Ideally you want it at yourbusinessname.com. That's something that's going to make you stand out. And that's a relatively cheap thing to set up. You don't even need a website to be able to send email from your own domain name. You also want to make it so that within the email, it's kept short, it's kept concise, ideally less than 100 words. And you've got your contact details in the signature so that they can see that they can get back in touch with you. Within those 100 words, you include a piece of the information that you researched during your whole alignment process, during that whole process before you even approach the brand, to essentially entice them to talking to you further. So if say Adidas are doing a campaign about young people in hip hop, and your audience is all about young people in hip hop. You run a record label, or you have a creative company that specifically works with that market. Then that's what you include in the email. You just say, hey, I know that you're trying to do this and I am doing this. Let's talk. It's as simple as that. Most people will then continue to ramble on about their history and what they've done and where they've done it. And it doesn't matter. All it is you find their problem and you say, this is how I can solve it. Let's talk about it. That is it. And then sign off with, call me tomorrow, or call me later on, or email me back if you want to do this. Those are the emails that get the attention paid to them. So it's not the big biographies. It's not the big, CVs or anything like that. It is this, here's where I solve your problem. Call me. And that's all it needs to be. That's it.
I guess one thing that I took from that, because it's easy to, in these emails, try to go over history of your accomplishments and, hey, here I attached this 10-page PDF of our services and what we have done in the past, which is, like I said, but I guess for an intro, and that's what we're talking right now. We're not going into further conversations. That's for laying the brand. We're going to talk about that then. But from the intro, it's more so, here's what I can do. Here's the gap. Here's what I can do. Hit me later. It's not, okay, I've had 10 years of it. No, it's not there yet. Cause there's a billion companies that can say all this other stuff. But once you get into and trust me, once you send stuff, and if you get to the next level, those questions will be asked to a certain extent. But yeah, so I think that was tactical. That was precise. One thing I do want to ask before we go into a little bit about pricing is, can you share with us a story? Cause I know you've had stories where you sent emails, you had it back and forth, and then there's silence. And then sometimes when there's silence, we're humans. You think, man, they forgot about us, or man, I guess it ain't meant to be, etc. Can you share us a story if you have one where the communication, it took way longer than you expected, but you ended up closing the deal?
Yeah, goodness, I've got quite a few stories with that. Oh my goodness, yeah, there's loads. The key thing with that is when you start a conversation and it seems really positive, and you're talking to the decision maker and everything seems to be going in the right way, and then all of a sudden they fall off a cliff edge and you don't hear from them again. And as far as you were concerned, you were due to sign something within a few days and it just isn't there anymore. You've got to understand that big brands work they work in crazy ways. So you'd assume that actually they had this like whole nice methodical process way of doing things, that, decisions were made, carefully, and that the people involved in them would all be, considered. And it's not that at all. Big brands are chaos. Behind that, that glass exterior, there's just chaos happening.
Amen.
It's absolute, crazy there. So you almost have to realize that just because they've fallen out of contact with you, it's not because they don't want to do the deal, but it's because that their attention has just been shifted. So what you just need to do is make sure that you stay at the top of their mind, which can be difficult for you as a small business if you're relying on signing a specific contract for a piece of business. That's hard. And again, that's something I can go into later because, in terms of planning, cash flow and that sort of thing, it can be really difficult if you're expecting, hey, we're going to sign this deal, we're going to get this revenue, and actually it doesn't materialize. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. This is how big brands work. So sometimes, people get sidetracked. And one of the there's a company that I did do this for. And they're a huge company. Actually, it was the first company I landed the brand with my animation company. And they're humongous, absolutely crazy huge. So we did the deal. And I signed the agreement on my side, but never got a signed agreement from their side. And then just sort of never heard anything from them again. Like this went from us emailing each other and being in contact at least once or twice a day to all of a sudden crickets. There was nothing. And it wasn't until me sort of calling them up. And again, I was ringing the number that I had, but no one was answering the phone and that sort of, and I was like, this is crazy. It's like they've just disappeared. When I rang up the switchboard and I asked to speak to them, that the woman on the switchboard explained that person doesn't work here anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think he'd been let go rather swiftly, and I have no idea why. And I have no idea what happened, but all it took was for me to say to her, okay, can you let me know who is, replacing him or if his role is being handed over? And she was happy to do that. Now I could very easily have thought, hey, they don't care about me, or they're not interested anymore, so I'm going to leave it, But it wasn't that at all. It was that this guy had just been fired, basically, and they were sorting themselves out with a new person in that role. Now, when I got in touch with that new person, they were honest with me and they said, look, right, I'm just starting here, but let's resume this in a couple of weeks when I've got my head around everything that's happening. And we were able to do that. And again, we were able to do the deal.
Wow.
So it wasn't that, again, it wasn't that they just weren't interested anymore. If they weren't interested, the cool thing about big brands is generally they'll tell you, they'll say, hey, we're not interested. They don't care about your feelings. They'll just say, look, no, or they won't engage with you at all in the beginning. So if you've got their engagement and you're having that conversation, they'll say to you, yes, we want this, or no, we don't. And part of that responsibility lies with you as well. You can help them to go down that route. You can guide them and ask them questions. Would you like to, or would you not? Allow them to say yes or no. Because ultimately, if it is a no, you want that no as quickly as possible. You don't want to be hanging around waiting for them to eventually tell you this is not going to happen. It's much easier for you if they say no in the beginning. So you can move on and find a different brand. You want that decision as quickly as possible. But if for some reason it goes quiet, don't assume that it is a no. Go back to them until you get that no. Give them the opportunity to give you that no.
And remember, it's not always about you. Like you said, sometimes people get fired, stuff happens, budget cuts. Like it's not nobody sitting here saying, oh man, Kymberlee emails to give me this. I don't know what to do. No. Stuff is going on. Like you said, it's chaos. A lot of these companies, man, it's something is not always what you see. Just because they're $1 trillion company or $1 billion company does not mean that they're waiting to, let's be real. If you're a multi-billion-dollar company, a $50,000, $100,000 contract is not the first thing when they wake up on their mind. It's not going to change at all. It's not that money don't move it. Like they got multi-billion-dollar mergers that could be happening or big boy contracts. So it's just a patience thing and not just, and then also too, I'm glad you stayed true once, cause I definitely early in my career would have definitely once I saw my man got fired, I would have been hurt. I would have been like, all right, man, next company, but you stayed in the pocket. You got it done, man. So, I do want to touch real briefly pricing, more so in the aspect of, all right, you're in this convo, but specifically, because I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast have never, I can say probably have never really signed a bigger contract with, establishments like governments or, big companies, agency, etc. So now you're in the door. They're talking to you. They say, yep, we're ready to go. But you have no idea about this pricing. You're Googling stuff. You're trying to piecemeal stuff together. If you had to share just your best practices, that person out there to say, hey, once we get to the door, I don't know what to do as far as pricing. They like what we do. Where do we start? What would you tell them?
Oh man, pricing is such a difficult one. I think in that scenario, I'd ask them to look towards their competitors But even that is not a strategy. That's pretty bad. I mean, I think ultimately what you need to be able to do is your business needs to make a profit. So you need to know whatever you're charging them. And this is really important because often people will lower their pricing thinking that that's what it takes to be able to land the brand. And they end up undercutting themselves and they end up going out of business because they haven't made enough money. They've got these huge names behind them, but no one's paying them enough money. So it's really important to get the money aspect right. That being said, money is, it's not actually the be all and end all in terms of the decision that the brand is going to make. Yes, they do have budgets. Their budgets tend to be pretty extensive though. So, often if they can see value in what it is that you provide, they're going to pay for it. If you can do something that they can't do very easily, they're going to pay for it. And essentially you can put a price on that and sit that wherever you want to really. Mm-hmm. It's a difficult thing because, if you have expertise and they know that it's going to be either difficult or time consuming to be able to access that kind of expertise, then they're going to just pay someone else to do it, and consultants and contractors for big brands, they earn anything from, 1,000 to 25,000 a day. Some people charge crazy money because they know that what they do is something the big brand can't do. And that the big brand need it. They've done enough research and know the big brand need it. So they can just add the premium on top of what it is that they want to charge. So I think the most important thing here is actually, make sure that whatever you charge, it's enough for your business to turn a profit. And that number in the end is almost irrelevant so long as you provide the value behind it. Mm-hmm. But just don't go out of business trying to impress a brand by being the cheapest. Mm-hmm. Because also the fact that you're cheap can go against you as well. If you're low priced, then a brand won't even go near you. Mm-hmm. It's like even with, the animation company. When I first started out, my videos were costing next to nothing to produce. I didn't have any overheads. It was me doing it personally. So I was charging very little for them. But the equivalent animation studio who was working with the big brands, who was doing work for television, they were charging, 100 to, 500 times more than I was to those big brands, even though ultimately our quality was the same. And it was because they positioned themselves at that price point that big brands looked at them and said, hey, they must be better. They must be higher quality. They must be the ones that we work with because they're going to be more reliable and they're going to give us what we need. Whether or not they do is completely irrelevant. And usually they don't. But often when we see something that's at a higher price, a premium price, we as human beings, that's what we look towards. We think, we aspire to that. We aspire to luxury. So therefore we want we're going to pay, for the higher price good or service because that's what we aspire to. It's rare that if you've got the money or you have access to funds and they're available, that you'll immediately say, hey, I'm just going to get the cheapest one. Often, if it's something that you care about, you'll say, I'm going to look at this carefully. There's a mid-range one. There's a high-price one. There's a luxury one. I'd like to get the luxury one. Often I can only afford the mid-price one or even the lower-price one. But if I had unlimited budget, I would do this one. And big brands are humans. They think in exactly the same way. They want to pay for quality. They want to do that because they want the best possible thing that they can get for their brand. So therefore, positioning yourself at a higher price, often it gives the perception of quality. So there's a lot to balance when it comes to pricing. There's a lot of ins and outs. And again, within Land the Brand, I'm going to go through some different pricing strategies that you can use because depending on what it is that you offer, you might find one is better than the other. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just whatever you do, don't go out of business trying to impress a brand.
And I gotta give kudos to that as well for anybody listening. One thing I want to add to that is, cause I made this mistake time and time again when I first started was being crystal clear about what your expenses are. Specifically, like you said, if you're a one man army, one woman army, do not just think that your time is your only expense. You got to think about like there's so many more things to think about when you think about expenses. And a lot of people that specifically solopreneurs or people that maybe just one or two people, they just say, oh, well, shoot, I mean, a video, well, shoot, I got the software and I got everything else. So it just took me 3 hours to make it. So shoot, $300, that might be it. Like, hold up. You're not taking into account the amount of money you pay for that software, the time it takes when you're talking to somebody else, when you're talking to a friend about this idea, the time. It's like, it's so many other things as far as expenses that you're not taking into consideration. So then you take on this deal with lowballing, and in the end of the month, you're like, hold up, why am I losing money? Because you just take your time for granted, you take your computer for granted, you take the power for granted, you take the roof that you're under doing it for granted, you take the gas that you go to, you go to that Panera Bread for granted, you take your mental stress for granted, like, cause I mean, a lot of y'all probably want economic majors, so opportunity costs too weigh into it. The opportunity that you're spending time doing that as opposed to doing something else to be making money, there's so many other things that you have to consider. So the challenge out there for my business owners, specifically my first time entrepreneurs, is be crystal clear on what time it takes to create it. Be crystal clear on that, if anything.
Yeah.
So the last two things I want to discuss, and then we'll be out of here, is, and some of this is really like for the people, but I do want to talk about it. Is there a strategy? Okay, now you got the contract, you put your pricing out there, but now you have to deliver, right? Mm-hmm. How do you frame expectations the right way? Because like I mentioned before, it's easy when you're working with a big brand to say, okay, now we got the bag. I need to over deliver. I need to over promise. How do you, from your perspective, measure expectations and make sure you're delivering on something you could truly deliver on?
Well, again, you have to be clear about what it is that you can and can't do. So you have to be strong in saying yes and no to certain things. And also know that again, is not the be all or the end all of the decision. Cause I think often, if you do get in front of a big brand and they say, okay, yes, well, we need video, but can you also do this, this and this, and you just go, yes, you say yes and you figure it out later. No, that's not always the best idea. I've done that a couple of times in my life and it's panned out. I've done all right, but man, I don't think the stress was worth it. So being very clear about what it is that you do and what it is that you don't do is so, so important. There's the ice cream truck has just pulled up outside. Oh my God. I'm here closing the window. I'm like, shut up. I'll start that sentence again. So being really clear about what it is that you do and what it is that you don't do. The brand are really going to respect this because they love clarity. They love knowing where they stand. So letting them know exactly where they stand. And that's not just in terms of what you can deliver. It's also when you deliver it, how you deliver it. These things are all really important in terms of the actual delivery aspect. So if you say to them, right, yes, we can give you this. It is going to be by this date. If you need something from them, so whether or not it's a brief or whether it's, a decision or feedback, you've got to be exceptionally clear about when you need that in order to be able to deliver when they expect. So there's almost a point where once you've signed a contract with them, your role changes slightly and you actually become more of a parent. Interestingly enough, you find yourself having to lay down the rules and you've got to be confident in doing so. Because again, if a brand doesn't know where they stand and if we keep moving the goalposts, firstly, it makes you look unprofessional. Secondly, the lack of transparency can be really worrying for a big brand. Thirdly, for you as a human being, the stress is just beyond. It's ridiculous. We don't need that. But if everybody knows where they stand, then we're okay. We can make this work. Similarly, if something happens during the delivery process where you can't do what you said you originally could do, then you have to be honest and upfront about that immediately. You have to say, hey, I know I said this, but this is where we are now. This is what's happened. And this is what I'm going to do to remedy it. So it's not a case of just saying, hey, right, well, I can't do that now. Find alternatives. Show them that you're working to make sure that you deliver upon your promise. That is so important. Now, nowadays, when I'm working with a big brand, and it's funny because this sort of ties into the retention thing as well. I do this thing where I under promise and I over deliver, and I do it strategically. So I lay down the rules and I say, this is what you're going to get and this is when you're going to get it by and this is how it works. for this amount. That's it. But then I'll either find a way specifically to come in early, so to deliver early, or deliver under budget. Now, there's a strategy that's used by a discount airline here in the UK and in Europe. The airline is called Ryanair. And they're awful. They're an absolutely terrible airline, but they've got the monopoly on a lot of the routes that business people want to travel between the UK and Europe. So you always find yourself flying with this airline because no other airline flies there. I can't stand them. But one of the things that they do really well, I wouldn't even say really well, but one of the things that's interesting about them is that they set their flight schedules and then they arrive early. So you're like, whoa, I didn't expect to land until 4:10 and it's 4:45. This is insane. Well, in actual fact, all they did was expand the time that they told you. So they always intended to arrive at 4:45, but they told you 4:10 because they want you to be excited when you land because you're like, yes, I'm in early. This is great. And so I took that. I took that strategy and applied it to my animation company. So I'll always add on an extra week or 10 days for the delivery. I'll say, look, this can't be delivered until this point. And then that gives me some wiggle room in case something does happen. So we've got that space in terms of delivery time. But also if we deliver early, we look incredible. And that's what's happened. The brands that I've worked with have always been like, this is outstanding. You always come up early. This is great. Well, no, what I've done is just added on a few extra days, And it's simple things like that. Again, it's not meant to deceive anybody, but the idea is that, you want to be able to, you need to remember that they're human beings first. And ultimately what they're trying to satisfy are their human needs, even in terms of how they're working with you and how they're connected to the brand. So if you can make their lives easier, if you can help them to increase their revenue, if you can help them to save them time, if you can help them to look great in front of their consumers, or even better, if you can help them to look great in front of their boss, then you are always going to be the first people they call every time. And by giving them little things that allude to that, again, saving money where you can, if possible. But again, or you could look at overinflating the budget. That might be slightly, dodgy, but I prefer the time, overinflating the time thing. But if you can do something that just helps them to be more at ease and feel less stressed, they will come back to you every single time. And that immediately connects with what we were going to talk about next, which was retention, ultimately that's what it's about. It's about that kind of under promising, even though what you're promising is what you will supply. And then that over delivering, because you're going to tack on that bit at the end that says, hey, remember me, I've got your back. We're going to do this together.
And the last thing I would like to add on that is, specifically with that delivering piece, is if you can be crystal clear, once it's delivered or once it's shared and now you're here, is having the mindset that specifically once you have the contract that you control more than you think. Because sometimes the date, like there's been times where I promised stuff in dates that I knew it was going to be a stretch for me to do. But I got caught in the bind. I was like, I can do it. And then I spent my whole time stressed, kicking myself and getting mad at the company, getting mad at myself because of this date that I created. And then as far as expectations, a lot of times you create the expectations once you have your first initial consult about what you can do. So then once you, like you said, you say you could do that, I can do that as well. Now you're mad because dang, you may not be as skilled as you could at that. And now you fall short of the expectations that you created. They only asked for a video. You said you could do social media marketing too. So now they asked for one video. You just sold them on social media marketing, content management, all this other stuff. And then now you mad at them because they asking you, okay, what's the status on social media? And in your head, you like, man, you just hired me video. No, you sat in that meeting and said, hey, I could do this work and sell, but you controlled that. All they wanted was a video by September 24th. You didn't say you gonna get them a video, a whole year content marketing strategy plan, also audio, a creation, a whole series by August 15th. And now August 10th come around, they're asking what's the status. And now you're upset. You control that. So I think we have to realize once you do have the conversation about pricing, etc., you control the scope. So don't put yourself in a horrible position and then get mad, because I've done it so many times because I don't know why, because I've seen numbers that I've never seen before. And I said, okay, cool. I'm going to do stuff that I've never done before. It's not the strategy.
Oh, listen, Greg, I don't think you're in the minority with that. I think most people that's the reaction you'll get from everybody generally. The moment you can see the budget, you just go, yes, of course I can. You know, it's like, yo, it's crazy.
As we close, I think you already, you touched it. If there's anything else you want to add to the retention part, as far as from a tactical perspective, because sometimes what I've seen is you deliver well on a project, what you think you've done, the people say you've done a good job, but then some people may not have asked for the retention or may not have a particular strategy on what does it look like after. And then also too, from a pricing perspective, okay, and we talked about it offline, what does it look like? Say, hey, I went out, I did this, but now they want to do it again. Should I raise my price? Should I do this? So, if you could just share a couple of things, maybe 1 to 2 things on is there a specific strategy? Okay, now the project is done. They've acted like you've done a good job. Is there certain things I need to say? Or do I need to already be prepared for that retention? What that conversation looks like? Do I need to schedule it beforehand? Or what does that look like?
Yeah, I think follow up after a job is done is really important. It's really key. So making sure that not only from your perspective, but also it shows that you care, you know, about what you've done and you care about the brand and the team that you've done it for. If you can say to them, hey guys, look, how did it go in the end? I created that video. How was the conference? You know, it was there to open the conference. How did the conference go? You know, and, you know, is there anything that, you know, we might have done differently, or, you know, that you would like to try next time? You know, just keeping those lines of communication open, because their feedback is going to be invaluable in terms of you being able to develop your product and service as well. Because they might say, hey, yeah, well, you know what? It was great, but we did 2 minutes and we probably should have done 3 minutes. So, you know, next time, maybe we should do 3 minutes. Now, off of the back of that, they might not hire you again. We don't know that, but a similar organization might. And therefore you can say to them, when we did this before, you know, this is what it looked like, but actually we needed to do this. So you can just put that information out there. So to get the feedback, being able to get feedback is super, super important. Just to understand how you've done and what you might do differently next time. And to show it, like I said, that you care. I think that in terms of then turning that into a retention strategy, you have to be quite forward thinking about what that brand is doing, and how, again, you're going to fit into it. So you may have created a video for the conference. So as an example, I worked for a smaller organization, creating conference videos. So we created this, and it was interesting because at that conference, the brands there were actually humongous. There was Pepsi there, and there was Google were there, and Facebook were there, and all these huge kind of brands were at this conference that we created the video for. And afterwards, you know, I sort of looked at their website again. I had some feedback about the conference. They were like, yeah, everyone loved it. Everybody thought it was great. And I looked at the website and I said, you know what you could do with this video content? We could break it up. And we could create some standalone videos across your website to be able to explain some of these key, you know, ideas that you've got and some of these key strategies to anybody looking in, because actually doing that might mean that we'll increase the footfall for conference next year. But if we need to start now. And they went with that. So I ended up turning that one video into making a series of 12 videos for them in order to be able to help them build their list and build and you know, push their marketing strategy for the following year's conference. So, and I had no intention of doing that in the beginning, but it was just about what can we do now to be able to continue to add value, to continue to be useful down the line. And I think that's what it's about. I think it's less about saying, hey, we want to retain these clients because we need the money. We've got to get this money in every month. And it's more about, hey, how can we actually add value to them? How can we help them to deliver upon their promise, upon their brand promise continually? Because the moment you figure that out is the moment they're just going to keep paying you. Even if you say to them, hey, stop. Like I had a brand that I had to stop working with because, to be honest with you, we weren't very aligned. I thought we were. We worked together well in the beginning. They had a change of management. The new management and me didn't really see eye to eye on what we were doing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to need to stop with this. But they kept coming back and saying, okay, if you won't do this, will you do that? And if you won't do this, will you just do this bit? And it was like, yo, I can't, I'm not going to take your money because, you know, what I'm trying to do here, it doesn't fit with what it is that you need. But it's a great position to be in with people saying, hey, take my money. But that's not for your own soul and your own sanity. That's not where you want to be. So think about how you can add value and how you can help that brand to be even better. Because if you give them ideas, they're going to run with them. They like ideas. Big brands love ideas. So don't be afraid to give them ideas. And to be honest, those of you who are a little bit scared about giving ideas because the big brand might run off with them and do them themselves, that might happen anyway. You have no idea whether or not that's going to happen. It's worth just putting the ideas out there and just letting them float away, rather than being scared and withholding everything and that brand not realizing just how capable you are.
Yeah. And I can say that too. It's dangerous because I've been in that competition. I've been in that before. And it was, I did at one point, I thought they were about to run off with the idea, but at the end of the day, here's what happened. A week before they need to do it, guess who got a call and guess who got the rate that they wanted? Because at the end of the day, a lot of, especially unless your idea is groundbreaking and changing, a lot of times they don't have the time or the bandwidth to do it, even if they wanted to. Yeah. Even if they wanted to, if it's a new idea outside the scope they've ever done or whatever, that means, because you got to realize, like she said, there's like, you know how many positions there are at these major companies? And you know how many emails it has to touch, how many submissions and blah, blah, blah it needs to have to get a building space, to hire people, to do all this other stuff. So a lot of times out of 10, it's going to take more energy for somebody else to do your idea than it is for you just to hire you and pay you. So let's, and I never thought about that because I was like, oh man, they're going to take it. Like, who going to take it? It's going to cost them, hundreds of $1,000s in time to do an idea that probably cost 30 grand. Like, to be real, and it doesn't make any sense. So we're wrapped up on that, man. The last thing I wanted to share before we go is to land a brand. How can people find more information about it? And I got a couple situations I want to throw at you rapid fire. So matter of fact, let me do the rapid fire real quick and then we're going to do the tie-in. It's just a couple of things, right? I got 3 questions. That's it on the rapid fire. And then we're going to jump right into where they can find more information about the course, find you and all that good stuff. All right.
Awesome. Okay.
So the only 3 questions I have for this different version of, it's like a business rapid fire is 2. So if you're a small business starting up right now, knowing what you know today, would your first clients that you shoot for be friends and family, people you know, or would you start to shoot for once you have your strategy down pack and you have confidence that you can implement it, shooting for companies first? Cause I know a lot of small businesses, when you first start, you're trying to go for consumers, either your friends and family or people that you can, this closer to you, like is more B2B or B2C.
Yeah.
But you have opportunities to really do B2B. So what would you start for knowing what you know today?
That would depend on how you feel about your own business. Now, straight off the bat, I would go straight for companies. There's absolutely no reason why you can't take your product or service, ensure you've gone through the right alignment process, got the amount of knowledge that you need, and you know how to communicate with that big brand, and you go straight for it. Now, friends and family are great because they're close to you and they'll give you, you can try things out and know that it's not the end of the world if it doesn't quite work. So if you've not quite developed your product or service in full yet and you just want to test it, then friends and family are great. Though even in saying that, friends and family don't tend to tell you the truth. They tend to tell you what you want to hear. So sometimes going all in and maybe going straight to a big brand and saying, hey, yo, this is it. That's the baptism of fire that you need to get started. So I will always go in at the top end. I would always go in for the highest, the biggest possible client that I could find. And the only thing that stops us from doing that again is the fear, it's ourselves. There's nothing, within your business, within your strategy, if you know your stuff, and you know that brand, there is no reason why you shouldn't be connected, but fear holds us back. And so we play small in the hope that somehow this is going to help us to build our confidence, and slowly but surely. In actual fact, we don't need to. We just need to bite the bullet and go straight in at the top.
Love that. That's great advice. Second, for our creative entrepreneurs out there. So if you're a creative entrepreneur like yourself and you are say if you own a dance studio, right? You own a dance studio, you teach young children to dance, etc. But you're thinking like, man, cause it's tough running dance studios with children and stuff like that as far as it can be tough. Not say it's tough. It can be tough to generate revenue, etc. You're thinking, man, what will my service look like in a bigger brand? How could I, as a creative entrepreneur, work with different brands? Is there any ideas or what would you do as far as to see, what kind of fit I would have with it, and where would you go to kind of find out, if you could even make that happen?
So you first need to understand yourself, know who you are, know what you do, and know why you're doing it. There's a lot of people here in the UK that open up things like dance studios because they believe they come from maybe a dance background and they believe by having a studio, all of a sudden it'll give them this gravitas and they'll be recognized in the industry because they're a studio owner. And what they actually turn into is a very frazzled business owner with very little revenue and very little income because they hadn't thought beyond trying to score those points. They had no specific why. Their reason for opening the studio was because I want to help dancers to be better dancers. And it's like, well, okay, great. But beyond that, why are you here? Why are you laying your roots? Why do your foundations sit here? And until you know that, you can't connect with a big brand, because one of the things a big brand is going to ask you about is your story. They're going to want to know why. If you don't have a story, if you don't have a reason, then give it up. It's not going to happen. It's not just about the product and service you have. It's about you and it's about your story. So once you have a story and you've thought about your story, and everybody has a story. It's very easy for people to say, I don't have a story. I just opened a studio and that was it. No, there's a story behind it. There's a story behind everything. You've just got to sit and think about it for a little while and dig a little bit deeper maybe to understand the emotions and the experiences that you've had that have led you to this point. And once you have that, you can then go to brands that fit with that story, because you'll find that some brands have similar stories to you. Now, of course, the scale is going to be completely different. It's going to be massively different. If you're a one man or one woman band versus, 10,000 employees at this brand, it's we're talking completely different pictures here, but the underlying why, the reason, the story, it's going to be the same. You're going to find some where you think, hey, I'm driving towards the same purpose. Now, just quickly to illustrate that, when I started dancing with Nike, I was a plus size dancer. And one of the things, and that was my story, but I had no idea how that would ever fit in with a sports brand, because of course all athletes are tiny and, super muscular and fit and slim. And so I had no idea how my story was even applicable. But when I eventually spoke to Nike a few years later, I was telling the same story and I would tell the story and say, I'm telling you this story, but I don't know how it's relevant. Down the line, a couple of years later, Nike explained, we're launching a plus size range for female athletes. And, a lot of what you've told us and the things that you've spoken about have helped us to be able to shape that. So actually, or shape our communication of that. So actually, even when you believe, you don't think your story is important, as long as you stay true to it, you're going to find a place where it's relevant. And that brand, if you can find the right brand to align with, then you're going to complement each other's stories. And that is so, so important. So in order to be able to connect with and build relationships with brands, you've got to remember that they are human beings first. They look like, monstrous, corporate companies, and they are monstrous corporate machines, but they're run by human beings, and human beings love a story. And if you've got a story to tell them, you're going to engage them. You're going to connect with them. And it doesn't matter how big or how small you are, you can build a really strong and solid relationship with them moving forward.
Love that. And the last question. So say, for instance, now you have a company, you're planning this event and you're looking for sponsorship, right? And I know we already hit on a lot of things already during the show, but you're in this situation, you're looking for a sponsorship, you have 2 months out. What's the first thing you do?
Don't start looking for sponsorship 2 months out. That's the first thing you do. You need to start way before then. Again, you're looking for brands that are going to align from an audience perspective. So the people that turn up to your event have to have some kind of connection with that brand, or that brand needs to want to be able to communicate with that audience. Because ultimately, the brand is going to sponsor your event because they want to be able to get to your market. They need to find a way to communicate with them. There are sort of two paths to this, two prongs to this, because you've got the typical and traditional event sponsorship, whereby you might get a luxury brand or just a brand who puts their name on everything that you have. And of course, you mention them during the event, and everybody who goes there knows that they're there, and they all get a t-shirt and a goodie bag or whatever else. But there's a flip side to it, and that is the corporate social responsibility aspect of the brand, the CSR. And the CSR department are a department that are set up with people with a budget who are there to find causes and sort of charitable events or programs that they know their audience care about, and that if they get connected with them, they know that their audience will care about them even further. So it changes the perception of the brand in their existing audience. So again, two things. You're either looking for a new audience, so therefore you slap your brand logo on everything, or your audience are already sitting there and watching you. So you want to show them how charitable and how giving and how supportive you are. So you go and sponsor an event or sponsor a program to show them how much good you can do. So if you are a small community project, or, you know, you've got a charitable event happening, then big brands are still very interested in being a part of this if you can get to their corporate social responsibility department and talk to them about it. So it's important to kind of know the difference. If it's a commercial thing where, you know, the big brand just totally wants to sell to your market, then, you know, as you see with major sort of sports games and that sort of thing, where the big brands, you know, the advertisement they pay for during the Super Bowl, all that sort of thing, that is just straight down the line, you know, commercial, make some money. Here we are. Our audience is, your audience is should be paying attention to us. You know, there's that aspect of it. If you're going to do that, then like I said, you're going to need a lot more than 2 months to be able to bring them round and to be able to set that up. That really does take quite a while. But if your event has it's more of about doing good, and it's more community focused. You're working with young people, or, you know, you're working with people with disabilities, or, you know, you're working in health and all of the kind of social, you know, or political, you know, ideas that within the community, within the environment, whatever, then go to the CSR, because they move a lot more quickly. Their department is much smaller. They still have budgets to be able to spend, even though they're not quite as big as the commercial budgets. And if you've only got 2 months and there is something you're doing within your event that's doing good for someone, definitely go down the CSR route rather than trying to get a commercial sponsor on board, because that is, that's a big process. That's at least 4 to 6 months, if not more, that you want for a commercial sponsor. CSR, I've seen that turn around in 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah. It totally depends on what it is that you're trying to do.
Man, well, like I said, man, you've given us way over an hour of your time, man, giving us a lot of gems to break through. And I definitely think it's probably refreshing, because I ain't really been on my business tip for a while on the pod. It's been a couple episodes, man. So I'm glad to get back on the business bully, telling a lot of things that specifically for our small business owners, our entrepreneurs, and also too, they can touch a lot of people as they kind of tackle things that, and playing big. You got to play big in this thing. Yes, sir. So Minority Trailblazer Nation, make sure you go check it out, man, from entrepreneurs, for everybody in every industry. When you're trying to land brands, when you're trying to land big contracts and land big deals, this is the first place you need to go. All the information will be in the show notes, and it's simple. landthebrand.com. All right. So Minority Trailblazer Nation, as always, I need you to share this show, share this episode, because I know you know an entrepreneur out there. You know somebody out there that's struggling, or somebody that's thriving. You say, yo, they need a bigger platform. They need more sponsors. They need more contracts. Or you yourself are struggling. Share the episode. And number 2, as always, make sure you're changing the freaking culture. Good night.